My name is Vanessa. I am 34 years old, and I need to tell you about the worst Wednesday of my life. The day my husband came home 4 hours early and found something in our living room that ended our marriage in 30 seconds. I knew what I was doing. I want to say that first before anything else, because this is not a story where I pretend I didn't know. I knew. Every single day for 4 months, I knew. And I did it anyway. So if you're looking for someone to feel sorry for, I'm probably not the right person. But if you want the truth, the whole truth from the beginning, then stay with me. Because I think the truth is more complicated than it looks from the outside. My husband's name is Daniel. We met in college, got married at 27, bought our house in Charlotte 2 years after that. Daniel is a genuinely good man, kind, steady, the kind of person who remembers things. Your sister's birthday, your coffee order, the name of the doctor you mentioned once in passing 6 months ago. He is not a villain in this story. I need you to understand that. The problem was something quieter and harder to name. After 6 years of marriage, I had started to disappear inside my own life. Not dramatically, not with a big moment or a breaking point, just slowly, the way color fades from something left in the sun too long. I would sit across from Daniel at dinner and realize I had been somewhere else in my head for the entire meal. I would lie next to him at night and feel a distance between us that had nothing to do with the inches of mattress separating us. I was present in our house every single day, and I was gone at the same time. I didn't know how to fix that, and the truth is, I never tried hard enough to find out. I joined the gym on Park Road 14 months ago, partly because I needed to move my body, partly because I needed somewhere to go that felt like mine. 3 mornings a week at first, then 5. That's where I met Tyler Brooks. He was 29, had been a personal trainer for 6 years, and was the kind of person you notice not because he's loud, but because of the way he carries himself. Easy, confident, comfortable in his own skin in a way that I'd forgotten was possible. We started training together twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8 in the morning. For the first month, it was completely professional. He was good at his job, I worked hard, we were friendly. That was all. Then one Thursday we got coffee at the place next door and talked for half an hour, and I drove home thinking about that conversation the entire way. And that's when I knew, even if I wasn't ready to say it out loud, that something had already shifted. I want to tell you about the first morning I realized I was in trouble. It was a Tuesday in September, 6 weeks into training. We had finished a particularly hard session, and I was sitting on a bench near the water fountain, catching my breath, and Tyler was standing a few feet away, writing something in his notebook. And I had this sudden, very clear thought. I don't want to leave. Not the gym specifically, just this. This particular Tuesday morning. This particular room. This version of myself who was tired and a little bit alive. I drove home and made breakfast and sat at the kitchen counter in my empty house and thought about how long it had been since I'd felt like that. Like I was actually somewhere, actually present, actually in my own life. It scared me, and I went back on Thursday anyway. By month 2, the sessions were running over. We talked more than we trained some mornings. He asked me questions about my life that I hadn't been asked in years. Not because Daniel didn't care, but because after 6 years of marriage, some people stop asking, start assuming, stop treating you like someone who might have something new to say. Tyler treated me like I had things to say. One morning he looked at me and said, quietly, not making a thing of it, "You seem like someone who's been running on empty for a while." I said, "Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate." He nodded and moved on and didn't push it, which was exactly right, and also exactly the thing that made everything worse. The first time Tyler came to the house was a Thursday in November. Daniel was at work. I had a broken treadmill in the basement. Tyler had fixed the same model before. It was a practical thing, a reasonable thing, and I believe that was genuinely true at the time. He came at 10, fixed the treadmill. We went upstairs and had coffee and talked for 2 hours, and he left at noon and nothing happened. I stood at the kitchen window and watched his truck pull away and felt something I hadn't felt in so long that I'd almost forgotten it existed. The second time he came, the part had arrived and he fixed the treadmill in 40 minutes, and when he finished and stood up, I handed him a glass of water, and our hands touched on the glass and neither of us moved for a moment. And I looked at him and said, "Daniel won't be home until 7. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he put the glass down, and that was the end of the part of my life where I was a faithful wife. What followed was 4 months of Wednesdays. Daniel had early meetings downtown every Wednesday, was never home before 6, hadn't varied that schedule once in years. Tyler would arrive at 9:45, leave by noon, and the hours in between existed in a separate compartment from everything else in my life, sealed off, carefully maintained, never touching the edges of my marriage in any visible way. At the gym, we were completely professional. Nobody would have looked at us twice. I was good at the compartmentalization. I was good at it right up until the Wednesday I wasn't. It was February. Daniel left at 7:30 like always. I worked until 9. Tyler texted that he was on his way. I made coffee. He arrived at 9:45. We had 2 hours, minimum. Daniel's schedule was full. His 10 o'clock meeting, his noon lunch, nothing that would bring him home before 6. That was the calculation I had made every Wednesday for 4 months, and it had always been right. Except that Wednesday, his 10 o'clock got canceled. His lunch got pushed to the following week. He had a clear afternoon for the first time in months, and he decided, without telling me, to come home and surprise me. Maybe take me to lunch. Maybe just spend some time together for once. He told me this later, standing in our kitchen very quietly, while I sat at the table and stared at my hands. I heard the garage door at 1:53 in the afternoon. I want you to understand what those 3 seconds were like. The sound of the garage door going up at 1:53 on a Wednesday, when it should not have been moving for another 4 hours. The sound coming through the walls and landing in the living room like a sentence. I heard it and went completely still. Tyler heard it too. I saw it cross his face, that instant total understanding of what a sound means when it is the wrong sound at the wrong time. There were no good options. There was no version of the next 30 seconds that was going to be okay. We both knew that in the 2 seconds between the garage and the door. Daniel walked in through the kitchen. I heard his keys hit the counter. Heard him call my name the normal way, the easy way, the way you say your wife's name when you're happy to be home. Then he walked into the living room. He stood in the doorway and looked at me, and then at Tyler, and then at me again. And his face did something I will never forget and do not have a word for. Not anger, not yet. Something before anger. The moment before a building falls, when everything is technically still standing. He said, flat and quiet, "What is this?" Not a question, a fact being named. I said his name and heard how little it contained. Tyler said I should go, picked up his jacket, walked past Daniel, and I heard the front door close. Daniel and I were alone. He didn't yell. I think people expect yelling, but Daniel didn't yell. He stood there for a long moment, and then walked to the kitchen, and I followed him. And we stood in the afternoon light, and he said, "How long?" I told him 4 months. He nodded. Then he asked me one question, just one, and it is the question I have thought about every day since. He said, "Did you ever think about stopping?" I looked at him, at this man I had married, at 6 years of mornings and dinners and a life I had built and then quietly burned at the edges. I said yes. I thought about it. He said, "But you didn't." I said no. He picked up his keys and said he needed to drive, and I asked him to come back, and he said he would think about it. He was gone for 5 hours. He came back. We sat at the kitchen table until midnight, and I told him everything. Not just what he had walked in on, but all of it. Everything underneath it. The disappearing, the distance, the years of sitting at that dinner table somewhere else in my head. I told him I should have said something years ago. I told him I had been performing fine for so long that I forgot what not fine felt like until it came out of me in the worst possible way. He listened to all of it without interrupting, without raising his voice, without doing anything except sitting across from me with his hands flat on the table and his eyes on my face. And I think that stillness was harder to be in front of than any anger would have been. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. The kitchen was very quiet. The clock above the stove ticked. Then he said, "Why didn't you just tell me?" And I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. The honest answer, the one I've arrived at after 7 months of thinking about it, is that I was afraid. Not of Daniel, never of Daniel, but of the conversation itself, of what it would mean to sit across from my husband and say, "I am unhappy. I have been unhappy. Something is wrong with us, and I don't know how to fix it." Of what that admission would set in motion. It felt easier to be fine. It felt safer to keep performing fine until I couldn't anymore. And when I couldn't anymore, it came out in the worst possible way. In our living room on a Wednesday afternoon, and a good man who deserved better paid the price for my silence. We tried. 3 months of couples therapy, real conversations, the painful work of 2 people trying to understand how they arrived somewhere they never intended to be. But Daniel told me in the last session that he couldn't unknow what he knew, that every time you walked into our living room he saw it again. He was trying, and he couldn't stop. I understood. I didn't fight it. Tyler and I stopped seeing each other the day Daniel walked through that door. Whatever it had been, it ended in that living room, with the music still playing from the speaker on the shelf. I moved into an apartment in Dilworth, 10 minutes from the house that's being sold. I go to a different gym now. I work out alone, in the early mornings, before the place fills up. Some mornings I think about the version of myself that told the truth earlier. The one who sat Daniel down 2 years ago, 3 years ago, any of those dinner table evenings, and said, "Something is wrong, and I need us to fix it." I don't know if that version of our marriage would have survived either, but I think we deserved the chance to find out, and I took that chance away from both of us. That's the part I live with. My name is Vanessa, and this is my story.